All right. So welcome to our session to explore our Lighten Your Load program. We're certainly glad you're here. I'm here today with Christopher, works in our community and is our host for today. So as we go along, you're welcome to put anything in the chat box. Christopher's a good steward of that, and we'll be a small enough group where you're also welcome to just speak up. So just to start, I'm just want to check in and see kind of what brought you here today. If there's something in particular you would like from this conversation that would make it feel valuable for you. And then we have a few slides we can share to tell you more about the program itself. But for now, I just want to welcome you and see if you'd like to share anything to get us started. Right.
Um, I suppose I can start.
Yes, please.
Right. I'm just really curious, about the journey, this new journey, where it's going to take me. And of course, I want to mature a bit more, well, a
Okay.
lot more in terms of coaching and, the confidence in doing, especially this narrative coaching journey. So I'm really keen on learning more of what you have to, present to us.
Okay.
Yeah, in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a bit of context for to Brenda's question and maybe for the rest of you and while you're thinking of your question. So this is an immersion in a longer retreat that we're building for next year, which is a combination of two things. Most of the content for the Five Maturities is in the big paper, but this is much more focused on two things. One is, and largely, your own personal development, like what is the journey that you're on right now at this stage of your life? And what parts of yourself are particularly ripe for maturation to serve what you think is important to you right now. And the second thing is, we'll let Emma come in. The second thing is around giving you some practical tools to help you do that, even in this sort of brief 6-week immersion. And just so an example, so one of the sort of mantras or key elements of the Five Maturities is that it always begins by releasing, as opposed to adding. And so we were sharing in a call that Christopher was on just a few minutes ago about how at one point in my life, I probably had 3,000 books, all of which I'd read, some of them more than once. And moving continents in the last few weeks or so, I now have 150 books. And they're mostly there for sentimental reasons, not because they're markers for pivotal parts of my life's journey. And I just couldn't bear, I felt like I would be giving away an old friend if I let them go. But the vast majority of them I don't need anymore. And so that's freeing me up to imagine myself and my work in a new way because I'm no longer tethered to the books. And so we're going to give you things like invitations like that for you to choose what can I do in my external life that would free up my internal life to be more mature. All right. So Emma, good to see you.
Yes, hi.
Hey, we were just checking in, asking people if they had anything in particular they would like to share or ask in terms of what brought them here today.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really curious to understand a bit more about the program and and what you have in store for us, David, and also meet fellow practitioners. So
Yeah.
really pleased to be here.
Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Hello, Michelle. Welcome.
Hi, thanks.
All right. So again, as we go along, if there's anything that comes up for you, just feel free to put it in the chat box or just speak up. Let me go ahead and share the slides. There we go. All right. So So those of you who know me at all know that I love photography. And so I often build sl slides for programs not on around the content so much as around photos. Because I find the analogy in the photos often speaks louder than the words.
Mm.
So I picked this particular picture for two reasons, well, many, but two I'll share. One is, I don't know if you've ever had the occasion to hold a butterfly in your hand, like if you've ever been to a butterfly sanctuary. It's like it tickles because it doesn't weigh anything. So it's just the lightest of presences on your hand. And so for me, I would like to offer you 6 weeks of an immersion in opportunities to have this feeling more often. I find a lot of our current life and our current world can be heavy if we're not mindful. And so it's really kind of hard to make clear choices, and it's hard to always know what to do or what is best or where to go when we're feeling heavy. And so it's around how do we cultivate the capacity to feel like this lightness of being more often, even when we're dealing with difficult things. And it's not light in the means of frivolous or trivial. It's light in terms of we don't have a grip on it. If you grip the butterfly, it dies. Um, and so, how do we help ourselves release whatever's no longer serving us? And so we can be more present. And for you, it might be books. For you, it might be, um, all these things you memorized that you thought were once important and now realize maybe not. And the second thing is that uh, I lived for a long time in Portland, Oregon, which we discovered was actually at one point a migratory stopover for a subset of the monarch butterfly population that would travel south every year. And for a variety of reasons, it stopped. And so I was working with some folks to recreate an ecosystem where they would come back, and they are now starting to come back. But in that, one of the things that I learned is that we had this illusion that the butterflies pack their bags in the north for a long, warm holiday in the south. But in reality, the butterflies that start the trip are not the butterflies who end the trip. They
Mm.
actually go through multiple generations for many of them. And I just started thinking about how do these creatures know how to do that? And again, there is a built-in system within their DNA, but there's also something about the magic of how they make that journey. And I think one of the things that sometimes can be challenging for us is that we carry a lot because I think I have to know all these things, I have to learn all these things, I have to do all these things. And one of the things I'm finding is that in our society now, we lose track of our own instincts, our own animal nature, our own being as social creatures. Um, and so part of this is an introduction to how we might bring more of that natural vitality to what it is we're doing. And then the more that we can bring more of our full humanity to our work, the more that we can do the same for our clients. The whole paper's on the website, but I just want to capture a couple of sentences from it. And I want to just read this for a minute and absorb what feels important to you. Then we'll check in and see what you think about all this. So I'm curious if any of this spoke in particular to you. Again, you're welcome to write in the chat box, or if you'd like to speak, just let us know.
So, David, I have a question. I don't want to go too far ahead. I'm not exactly sure what will follow on the upcoming slides, but if I'm reading this, the question that arises with me is, so this is very much about the five maturities, also perhaps the programs that you did in the future. How is this related to the Lightening Your Load? What's the invitation, the Lightening Your Load program that can help me mature?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So the program, you'll see this in a few minutes, but the program is built around the five maturities, but we're not going to teach you the five maturities because I can't actually teach you to be mature. Life does that for you. But we use the five maturities as a frame for this. But in the 6 weeks, again, it's not the intent to teach you all about the five maturities. It's about giving you some experiences of each of them. And in that, we want to focus on the part of this equation that most of us want to skip. So, so we're by virtue of not teaching and allowing you to be attentive to your own experience, we're going to hopefully model that the first step of any work in this space is about what are you willing to release to make room for this. And so if you, for example, have wrestled during your life of sometimes not feeling like you're enough, and so you end up consuming more than you know what to do with because it's just sort of this insatiable need to prove that we're enough. So what if we released and let go of any notion or any desire or any expectation that we're ever going to be enough, or that being enough is even a thing that we should want to even want? If you were no longer worried about being enough, what would you do differently? So in this program, every single week that we're meeting across this 6 weeks, we'll give you a little bit of a snippet or a piece of each of the five maturities, but only to ask yourself, what around in this space might I consider letting go of or releasing or surrendering or whatever word works for you, that actually would make it more likely and available to you to mature. So maturity is not a destination we're going to march towards. Maturity is an outcome of the practices that we do together each week. And so that's what the focus of this Lighten Your Load is all about. How to immerse yourself in the five maturities, with each week starting from zero again in some ways with that maturity, and asking ourselves, what might you let go of to create more space and travel more lightly?
David, I have two comments here in the chat that I'm just wanting to share with you all.
Great.
One is by Sheila, and she talks here about rebalancing our priorities and strengthening our core, meaning to improvise more artfully. I guess that's the invitation for this program. And Sandra says, to me, maturity is something that comes with time, but that comes up is that being in touch with my wiser self. That is the must to be worked on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can be mature at any age for that age. So we're not comparing people across ages, but it's sort of like, if you have a garden in your backyard and then you realize, oh, some friends are coming over next week and I need to harvest some things from my garden. And so you go out and pick things from your garden, irrespective of whether they're ripe or not. It's not going to be very tasty for your guests. And so I think of, in this sense, maturity as a ripening. So much of, one of the many reasons why we don't do a lot of goal work with goals in our work is oftentimes we can only see so far. And a lot of what we actually might need to be working on, we can't even see yet. And so part of the value of maturity is particularly spiritual maturity, helps us to see more. And if you have children or have been around youth, you notice how a lot of their evolution is their whole world expands, their sense of themselves expands, their sense of ego and identity start to establish themselves. And you see them, like we do even as adults, just keep recursively moving through, reflecting on the same experience, like, oh, I never saw that before. And so we're going to give you a chance through the program each week to revisit things in your current life to see what that maturity might help you see about it. Anybody else? Christopher, is your hand? Oh.
Yeah, just as a comment, what I'm hearing here is that we're not only focusing on the maturities themselves, but that it can also help us bring more alignment and coherent among the maturities that we have. We might find ourselves really mature in certain areas, but maybe we have neglected some others, and beginning to see how we can strengthen the relationships among those maturities as well, not just focusing on them individually.
Yeah, indeed. All right. So with that said, I'm going to just do a little practice with you. So a couple of you will have seen this graphic. I found this some years ago when we were starting to teach our integrative development program. And I had some wonderful correspondence with the woman who painted this picture, which was wonderful. But I want to use it here to just talk a bit about maturities, and then we'll give ourselves a chance to practice this in just a minute. And so this all began when some authors used an old version of this model to develop all the competencies for team coaching for ICF. And so that led me to think, oh, maybe there's still some shelf life on that framework. And so I thought maybe I'll update that. And one thing led to another, and now we have the report. But the basic starting point was the need I saw for us to move away from conformative, normative kind of competency models. Competency models are great for beginners because it gives you the lay of the land. Here's the basic skills, the basic requirements, the basic behaviors. But scaling competency models to try to achieve mastery is quite difficult because the path to mastery, let alone maturity, begins but does not complete through competency models. And so I thought we need a more evidence-based, more enlightened view of how do people actually get better at what they're doing. So I expanded the masteries from 1 of competency to 5. Those are all the words in blue. And then I thought, but each mastery has a maturity that acts as a foundation for it. And enables us to make progress on that mastery. And part of the problem is that we tend to focus a lot of our professional development on what we imagine are masteries, but then we don't do as much with them as we might like, or they don't go as well as we might like. And it's not because we didn't try hard or they weren't good mastery efforts. It was that we didn't have the maturity to know how to use them well and wisely. And so I want to just sort of walk from the bottom up, and then we'll give you a practice for that for yourself. So for me, it all begins in the roots. This is our own personal maturity. And this contributes to our capacity, our emotional, somatic, cognitive capacity to hold space and be with somebody else while you're working with them. So a quintessential skill here would be our ability to self-regulate. Can we manage our own inner state while our clients are going all over the place? The example I most commonly give here is if you have had significant losses in your life that you've never really dealt with, it's going to be hard for you to hold space well enough for somebody who just lost their job. Because they're going to have emotions and experiences and ask questions and have needs that are going to activate things in you that you don't want to deal with or have avoided or don't feel very confident in. And so particularly in narrative coaching, but in all of our work, this ability to be a human being in all of our fullness with somebody else, for me, is the rootedness, the grounding of everything that we do. the more grounded and mature we feel personally, the more that we can see. And so spiritual maturity is all about service to the mastery of clarity. Its ability to shift perspectives, to take on new perspectives, to see more the big picture, to be clear about our own inner state, to trust ourselves so that we can be vulnerable because we can hold that space in which we can see more. This one is really important because so much of what, in my experience, I observe coaches doing is they're looking at the conversation through the lens of coaching. What do I say next? What do I do next? What's happening here from a coaching perspective? Which are all fair questions and can be valuable questions. But what I've observed over the years is that oftentimes this means that they're not seeing more than half, or they're not seeing a good portion of what's actually going on because they're so focused on what's my next move as a coach. And so this one is really about how do we help our clients and ourselves, because all of this work ultimately is more about what we do for the client and less about ourselves. But what can we do to allow ourselves to be more clear about and truthful about what's actually happening here? So rather than the woman like, oh, I've got it, I'm going to go do these things, it's like, no, I need to really sit with what is actually true for me. What is actually happening for me? What am I actually noticing? And that's where a lot of the gems, the real vital work of things like coaching come from. Otherwise, they're like all these aha moments are just sort of like cognitive epiphanies, and in more pejorative sense, I think of them as brain farts. They're just, and then they're gone. And we think there's something, but really they're not. They're just an opening. And the real work is more about spiritual maturity. And then as we kind of move up, as we start to break ground up and through the water and into the sky, this is where our more familiar pieces about professional maturity and competency come in. Do I know what to do with what I now see? Do I have the basic sense of the skills that are required, the mindset that's required? Do I have the basics of what I need to do now? And the more we develop our competencies, the more we start to feel like, oh, here's the fundamental principles behind that competency. Here's the fundamental theoretical base and evidence base. Oh, here's some nuances of how that might show up differently in different situations. And so if we just stay only with competency, we end up trying to mimic or do exactly what the competency says, regardless of context and regardless of fit and regardless of what's actually called for in that moment in time. And so like coaches are often taught in the beginning, you have to have a whole repertoire of powerful questions, which I would say is both true and not true. Because what I observe is if you stay focused on, I've got to have lots of powerful questions, you're always looking for opportunities to ask questions. And asking a question of a client in a given moment may be the best thing and the perfect thing for them, or it may be not useful, and it may be even unuseful thing for the client. So competency by itself is just, again, the starting point. I need to know how to ask decent questions. But then as we move in terms of what's actually trying to happen in the moment, we also need a sense of social maturity. That's an astuteness and awareness about our environment. And so this allows competencies to become capabilities. Not only am I better at the competency, but I'm much wiser and more astute about how I use those competencies, when I use those competencies, and particularly how I might need to adapt my competency to fit this situation. So if you think about like all of the efforts to diversify the coaching space, to recognize that different people, different cultures, different genders bring different things to coaching, need different things from coaching. Certain parts of the origins of coaching come very much from a white and relatively privileged background. And so that might not fit or be suitable for other people. And other people might bring whole different rich understandings of what coaching could become. And if we're not sort of aware and have enough social maturity, we're going to miss out on a lot of our blind spots. And so it would be, for example, if you have a lot of status in an organization for whatever reason, you have certain privileges that others don't have, formally or informally. And if you're trying to coach somebody about they should speak up more often and they should learn to be more assertive, which again may or may not be perfect for them or a great opportunity for them. But that might be a long ways from where they feel confident. And they might feel like if I did that, then it would not end well for me because I don't have the privileges that you have. And so this one's really important as we begin to imagine a different future for coaching. How do we be more wise and capable in how we use what we know? And then the last one comes all the way to the top, the flowering of our lily. And this is around credibility. And credibility is based on contextual maturity, which means I can be in this moment in time, in a coaching conversation, a facilitation session, in a workshop, whatever it is that we do, and whatever it is that you do. And I can sort of discern what I feel would be most useful at this moment in time. And so this one is essential because part of where the five maturities are going is to help us move away from competent implementation to conscious improvisation. So this credibility, this ability to improvise with consciousness is credible in two fronts. One is we become the work so that if I were to ask you, and we showed you a video of you working, I would ask you, what was going on for you then? What led you to do what you did? What do you notice about what happened? So it's an internal credibility of I know my work so well, it just becomes part of who I am, and I can tell you about my journey to do what I do in that moment. But it also has external credibility because I'm finding more and more that formulaic approaches to coaching are less and less effective. And the need to bring all of who we are and all of what we know to sessions is increasing to the point where I think we need new words besides coaching. For example, to have more of an external credibility that we do things that are relevant for our clients. So I'm going to stop there, and that's sort of a brief overview of the five maturities and what you'll experience. So we have 1 week on each of these 5 pairs and a week to get started. But I wanted to see if you have any thoughts or questions about this before I guide you through a practice on how to use this for yourself.
A quick question from me, David.
Yeah, Emma.
I'm curious to get your views on how would a participant feel at the end of the program in terms of shift in their maturity or the way they show up, and possibly also external evidence from clients who would notice differences. Any thoughts?
So, in a general way, I would say my wish for you is that you would end up feeling lighter, in the sense of you'd be able to show up to your clients with more ease. You would get less stressed. You would probably consume less. And so for the client, they would feel more met by you as a human being and therefore more free to be that way for themselves. Um, you might discover that there's things you can let go of in your practice or in your office or in your life. And you might realize, oh, there's some big blind spots I have in my practice. particularly like if you've taken on a new client or a new group that you're working with and you're realizing you're using some of your usual strategies, but this is not working for that group, you might have the personal maturity say, this is not working for this client. What am I not seeing as a result of that? And how might I need to develop myself to show up differently to them?
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we get to the one on spiritual maturity, I'll share a story about some recent somatic work I've been doing, which is changing the way how I'm breathing and what's coming out of that for me in terms of simple things like I get much less frustrated with drivers who don't pay attention. I am much more patient with the time it takes for things to unfold. Um, and I like to feel it's showing up in my life and in my teaching. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If there's any questions, I'd like to just guide you through a quick practice. So for this, it would be helpful if you could just find a comfortable place where you're sitting with your feet firmly planted on the floor and your eyes closed. It would be less distracting that way. We'll just do this for about 5 or 6 minutes and then we'll see where it takes you. So for now, we'll just notice the next 3 breaths. Nothing special to do with them, just notice them as they come and go. From this place, I'd like you to recall a recent encounter that in hindsight didn't go as you had planned and or did not go well. Could be a conversation with a loved one or partner, could be a difficult client, it could be an encounter in your town, but something that in hindsight you wished had been different. And if there's a particular image from that encounter or moment in that encounter, bring that to mind even more as a place to do the work. So in that moment, speaking of personal maturity, what were you not able to access in yourself? Perhaps you couldn't find the right words. Perhaps you couldn't find an emotion that was aligned with the situation. Perhaps you couldn't access patience. But what could you not access that contributed perhaps to it not being the conversation or encounter you'd hoped for? And because you could not access this, whatever this is for you, or access enough of it in a timely manner, what did you not see? So perhaps your impatience made it more difficult for you to see and appreciate what your words might have sounded like to the other person. Or maybe the lack of a sense of courage in yourself, that you didn't see the opportunity to speak up more for yourself. But what could you not see that perhaps you could see later, but not at the time? Because you could not see fully at the time, what did you not do? Or do and wish you hadn't? It made sense at the time based on what you saw, but in hindsight might not have been the right thing. So perhaps you rush to a judgment based only on your perspective. But another way to put this would be, what do you wish you could have done, but did not? Pick whatever form serves your scenario. And if you were to do this over again and be more masterful in what you did or said or thought, how would your social maturity need to increase? And by that I mean, what about the environment? What about the other person? What about the situation did you not fully appreciate or consider at the time? That in hindsight, you can see now more than you saw then, which would have enabled you to be more capable. So an example for me, my partner is German. And so sometimes, but we converse in English. And so sometimes I'm hearing English words, but they're really German in intent. So they don't come across as she imagines them. So I have to translate what is the intent, the under language, not literally always the exact words. That's part of our environment. So what is your environment calling to your attention in the scenario that you have in mind? What does it want you to see? And then lastly, now standing back and looking down over everything you've just discovered about this scenario you had in mind, this encounter that didn't go as well as you'd hoped. What can you see now? What can you feel now? What do you imagine yourself doing now that you have a fuller grasp of the context and therefore could be more credible in how you showed up? Right. So take another minute just to see if anything else emerges for you from right now, starting all the way from the roots down in your feet, all the way to the top of your head. And when you're ready, I would like you to just open your eyes and come back to the room and just take a minute or two. I'll turn my camera off, just not distract you. And just take some notes for yourself. You can do it on your own. You can put some of that in the chat box if you so choose. And then we'll come back and see what you think. Enjoy. Mhm. 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 Got it. So I'd be happy to hear from any of you, either that if you've written in the chat box and want to share more about that, or just want to speak. I'm going to take the slides down and just see if any of you would like to share. Mm. Mm.
So Brenda is writing in the post, for me, it was to be more aware of the environment
Mm.
related to the family issue and recognizing the need to be silent.
Mm. Mm.
I can share.
Yeah, Emma.
Yeah, I put my foot in my mouth, really.
Oh,
Yeah,
how did that taste, Brenda?
awful. It's a situation with my daughter. So I think we need to recognize, even in our households, when we need to be silent,
Mm.
and we don't always have to respond to something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah.
And Emma, you were going to share as well.
Yeah. So I'm currently in France for a few months. And the main reason is, I mean, there's many reasons why I'm here. But one of my deep wishes is to reconnect with my mother,
Mm.
because we've had a difficult relationship in the past years, and I do want to make the most of my time with her as she's getting older. And but every time we meet, we often argue, and there were a lot of flusters in me last weekend that we spent together, and then yeah, I so through this exercise I realized that instead of responding, being frustrated, um, I think it's the kind of the hurt from my
Mm.
child self that is still looking for her mother's approval, love,
Mm.
and so it's the insecure part of me that's still so through this exercise. And I mean, I also work with a therapist on this.
Yeah.
It's letting go of
Mm.
the need to be seen by my mother in the way I wish, especially my little self wished,
Yeah.
and really let go and accept her for who she is and how
Mm.
she expresses herself, which can be very cutting, very short, sometimes very disrespectful, but that's how she is.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and be graceful about it. So yeah, that
Mm.
was a really good exercise. Thank you.
Yeah. I was talking, yeah, to a friend of mine who had that same dilemma, and every time I talked to her, she said, "I just have to accept my mother's just the way she is." But she said, like, for 5 years she's kept saying that, and I said, it doesn't sound like you're letting her be who she is, because you keep having to comment on this. So I appreciate that, what you're sharing, and a lot of it is we keep returning back to our own capacity.
Mhm.
which part of me is showing up in this conversation. So if your young self that was unfulfilled starts the conversation, then all the rest is the roots are, are just not able to hold the bigger space. And so a lot of it just keeps coming back to which parts of myself are showing up today. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Two more. Oh, there's someone raised the hand.
Yes. And how do you pronounce your first name?
Junji.
Junji. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's a Hungarian name
Okay.
because I'm originally from Hungary. Well, similar to what I think Emma was talking about, I recently had, I was trying to help mediate a conflict. And so I think this exercise helped me to be more like reflective of the importance of just silence and trying to ask more questions rather than respond. Because it is, again, as you said, David, the words mean different things. And so when I hear the words, and I was more familiar, so this is an ongoing conflict. So I was trying to present the other points of view, and it was all resentful the way how it was received. So and so I think just listening more and being more patient, and also I think I could have done more about acknowledging the person, what the person was saying, because I think all this is originating from what they think and what they feel, which is deep rooted, right? It's a personal conflict, but it has a lot of consequences. So I think the person really would need to release that pain. So yeah, I think again the context, how to interpret the situation, and just being more there for that person in terms of like in that moment, so that they feel like they are heard more.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's reminding me that one of the things we'll ask you to do during the first session is maybe come back to some of these, but to identify one or two scenarios in your life where this would be particularly helpful, so that you're grounding each of the week's practices and helping you resolve or move forward with something that matters to you in your daily life. And we found that just keeping that focus smaller allows you to make more progress and more maturation around something specific rather than trying to cover lots of ground. So yeah, that's great. Is there anybody else who would like to share that has not already?
So there are a number of comments here in the chat.
Okay.
One was in the midst, so I guess that's a realization of this exercise, in the midst of an organization transition, struggling with a leader leaving and the new leader I report to, not seeing the value of coaching and leader development. And then the other one, which is a little bit longer, I wondered, Michelle, would you like to share it in the group, or do you want me to read it for you?
Yeah, I don't mind. Excuse me, I don't mind talking to it. I recently did I was doing a facilitation session, or facilitating a session with a group of folks, and one of the participants made a comment in the group, and it didn't fit the moment. Let's say, well, at that it didn't fit the moment, and was really rude. And I remember my physical reaction to it, and the deep breath that I took to kind of steel myself against it, but I didn't follow through on responding to it, and in a way that would have modeled for others an example of what they could do in the case that he did the same thing with them. And yeah, that was a lost opportunity. But so this exercise is really helpful to deepen my acknowledgement of that, because I acknowledged it afterwards in hindsight. But this exercise gave me a bit more insight into it. So yeah, really helpful.
Yeah. And so in the Five Maturities model itself, one of the premises is that the success of, say, for example, coaching or facilitation is less about how great of a job we've done, but more about what is the outcome for the participants. And which means that all of these maturities we're developing in ourselves so we can develop them in others. And so, like in moments like you're describing, Michelle, not only is it, can I manage myself so I bring my best self to this moment to enrich the moment, but are things that I can use about my understanding of the five maturities where I could actually help the person who made the rude comment, or help the group rise to that occasion and be with the rude comment in a way that's going to be productive. Otherwise, people go away grumbling about that person, and then that infiltrates the rest of the culture. And so again, it comes back to this whole notion of improvisation, because and it's, despite our plans, stuff happens. Some we like, some not so much. And how do we use the maturities to bring our best self to those moments and help others do the same when they're ready? So, yeah. Christopher.
Yeah, so this was a really powerful exercise for me, and quite a painful so actually, because I recalled a tragic death in the family many, many years ago, and how at the time I was not able to anticipate such potential outcome. And as I was going through these steps, through these maturities,
Yeah.
it revealed to me that at the end of the journey, I could have a choice. I could have the choice of feeling guilty and bad about myself, or have the choice to actually learn and integrate and realize that, next time I can be more compassionate, more open, and I can also acknowledge and learn about my own suffering and all these kind of things. So, and that took me, basically, the journey started with the core and all the way up to the flower, and then the choice put me back right into the core. So I'm realizing through this exercise that this is a circular motion, that we go up and down and up and down, each time hopefully with a higher sense of integration, higher sense of coherence, and that this is a journey that never ends.
No.
And that we can start this journey anywhere. We can start with the contextual maturity, we can start with the personal maturity, depending on where the situation is, and then keep combining those maturities and linking them as we went through this exercise, and realizing, oh my goodness, if I go back all the way to the core and then end this journey with judgment, maybe I should focus a little bit more on bringing more healing to this maturity, to let it grow so that everything else can also be held more stable. So that was insight.
Wonderful. It's coming to mind for me, Christopher, is a conversation with someone recently who we both realized that she had sort of let me down on some agreements that we had made. And their initial response came from what seemed like a place of shame about that. And so there was this sort of point of mutual maturation, because I realized that the shame actually kept her from being accountable, because she was so hard on herself, and therefore I couldn't be hard on her. But that so her work to do was to deal with her own shame. And my work was to not react or kind of go down a different road, but let her be on that journey. Because ultimately, to be able to maturely take accountability would be a huge step for this person. And for me, if I judged her, or if I criticized her, or said, well, yeah, or tried to rescue her from her feeling of shame, then it sort of thwarts her journey towards learning to be more responsible to others, to commitments that are made. And going back to what you're saying, Brenda, part of our silence and not jumping in is letting those things kind of sort themselves out with the other person,
Yeah.
rather than trying to fix it or rescue them or whatever else we might do, which then often cuts the process off.
Mm.
Yeah.
The funny thing though is that silence is good and it could be bad, meaning that sometimes people misinterpret that as being indifferent, you don't care, no empathy, whatever. But I think it's your intention. And if my intention is that, you know, I'm understanding, I'm not going to judge you, as you just said, then I know who I am. And it's up to the person, hopefully,
Yeah.
to figure it all out. I don't know.
Yeah, and we live in a world of noise, and so
Yeah,
people often don't know what to do with silence
yes,
at
it's true.
all.
Yeah,
So then, really, for me, the trick is to how do I connote care without
yeah,
talking? And any projections that they put on my silence is their journey to be on, not mine.
right, right.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you see the five maturities as a kind of somebody used the word balance earlier, a balancing exercise? I mean, we may be immature in one place and
yeah.
mature in the other four for that matter, but somehow eventually we're hoping to get to a place of where we feel more balanced.
Yes,
Not perfect, but balanced.
yeah. There's no
Yeah.
perfection doesn't exist. So
No, not
if
at
I go
all.
back to Emma, your story about your mom. So a resolution might be, I can manage my own energy and my own state in the presence of my mother.
Mm,
That may be as far as that goes. And because some of these things because we only can do what we have control over.
yeah,
So Emma has no control over her mother whatsoever.
it's true.
And I'm a couple hours from going to visit my mother, so I'm carrying Emma's spirit with me. Yes. And what I could choose if I was in a less mature place, there's things I could say that I probably have said and wanted to say my entire life, but I don't anymore because it doesn't serve anybody. And yeah, yeah. So it's not a race. And so just realistically, we can't think of these necessarily all the time, but if particularly in reflecting on in the moment when something's not going well, or something just happened that didn't go quite well, just ask yourself, which of these maturities might have helped me?
Mm,
So my partner and I are joining households, and so we have figured out that um, it's better sometimes that we do parts of this on our own. To try to do everything together was just really a recipe for a disaster. But in just giving each other spaces to do some of the work on our own allows us the privacy to do our own inner work,
mm,
make some of these choices together. So a lot of this, again, the lightness and fluidity comes from just recognizing where does a lack of sufficient maturity in a given area, maybe, and how is that keeping me from having a more generative encounter, or at least a more humane encounter? All right. Is there anything else about the practice you'd like to share for right now? Otherwise, I'll just share a few slides about the program itself, and then and we'll see. Many of these sessions get done a bit early because people feel like they've got what they need. So we'll see where we get to.
My last question is the exercise we just did on breathing and really sensing where you are. This is something we can do with clients, right?
Of course, yes,
Yeah.
totally,
Good.
totally. Yeah. So again, it's an immersive experience for yourself, just to differentiate it from a teaching experience. But it's something that you can then bring to your clients or your family or whatever. And the more you practice this, the more comfortable it gets and the faster you can become aware of things in the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And then one of the features of the program, which is one of the things Christopher's helping us with, is we'll have a forum just for participants in this 6-week program. So if you have little victories, like I did it, I kept my mouth quiet for an entire conversation, then come share your wins with us. Or I tried some of this and it just failed so badly, or I didn't come out like I expected. Come share that as well. It's all part of the learning journey. And yeah. So let me just come back to here.
There just one point I want to re-emphasize, because you mentioned earlier that maturities cannot be taught, and you just also confirmed again that this program is not about teaching, but rather having immersive experiencing. So I suppose this program will be carried by similar experience that we were having just now.
Yes.
Across, with different emphasis and different focus areas, perhaps really allowing ourselves to step into our own inner world, to do our own inner work, so that we might arrive with a stronger sense of lightness towards the end that will help us into the next year with more purpose or clarity, or a sense of capability, perhaps.
Yes.
Depending.
Yeah, and so if there's any teaching, it's going to be around some resources and frames to reflect on your maturity now, and then to design opportunities to deepen your maturity in an area or two that feel important to you. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So this just sort of reiterates part of what we just said, but yeah. All right. So these are was there a question? Okay. So these are the 4 sort of components of the program. So there's going to be 6 live sessions with me. And we'll kind of walk you through some guided practices like we just did, and a bit more conversation around that particular maturity. There's also then some forum space, again, where you can share questions or reflections, things you tried, things you're wondering about. It's also is a great way to get to know each other and sort of deepen your connections to yourselves and the learning. You will be asked to sign up for a time zone for sort of a peer pod, and this you'll have assignments in your peer pod based on that week's topic. You can choose to use them or not, or adapt them, whatever you so choose. But it's really just in a more intimate setting to kind of talk through the essence of what you took for that related to that particular maturity, and sort of talk about it with peers. And then we'll have a handbook, which we always have for our programs, but this one's much more streamlined in terms of the content. But what we've added is that the key material and some inquiry, some questions to ask yourself as a journal are in the handbook, so that you have a chance to see the core information and a space to write and reflect all in the same handbook. So that's downloadable as a PDF when the program opens. And we think that'll be really helpful in terms of you being able to reflect on your own journey through the program, not just through the content. We're going to offer the same session twice a day. We've moved up the afternoon session a couple of hours just to accommodate me now that I'm living in Europe, not in North America. But that still allows us to reach the folks in Australia. There'll be 90 minutes. They'll be recorded, so you can come back and listen again, or listen if you missed your session. These are the 3 dates, and there's a whole bunch of FAQs on the website you can look at if you want more information. And yeah, so we offered it at a good price. And you can sign up here following this link. If Christopher, you would put these 2 links in the chat box, that would be great. And then if you have any questions that we didn't answer today, or you think of the question after we're done, you're welcome just to reach out to Steve, and he'll take care of it for you. All right. So there we go. Exit the show. So we just have a bit of time left. I'm just curious if there's anything else that you'd like to share or ask while we're all still here together. All right.
David, perhaps You might be rolling out a longer version of this program next year. And I wondered if you want to make some distinctions between this program that is more focusing on your own personal development and lightening your load vis-a-vis the other program that might be more geared towards applying it at work.
Yeah, so as you said, Christopher, this one is partially just to offer an introduction, but this one's all about you. And we'll have that. Yes, so you'll get tomorrow you'll get a link to this recording, which will have the slides in it. And the one we're doing next year is going to be for 6 months, and it's really about taking where we started in this program, although you could start there as well, but it'll be about yourself in the beginning, but then it'll be, what would this mean for your practice if you were to come from this place more often? How would you reframe your sense of yourself, your identity, your role? And then more importantly, how can you help your clients do this? And I just feel like in the world we're living in, it's a fantasy to keep teaching people stuff, but not giving them the tools to manage themselves. And we all need that more than ever. And yeah, and so you can sign up all the way to the days the program starts. And as always for their programs, we have a money back guarantee. If after the first module or session you think it's not for you or something comes up, we'll give you your money back. But you can sign up anytime between now and the start of the program in mid-October. Yeah, and if you have more questions, let us know.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you come and join us. I thank you for coming to be with us today and hope this has been helpful. And thanks, Christopher, for helping to host this. And we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.